How many of you are old enough to remember a time when you went into a restaurant or a bar and it was smoky and you couldn't breathe and you didn't enjoy your dinner because people were smoking cigarettes next to you? Any of you? Any of you old enough to remember when you drove with your parents on vacations as a kid and threw things out the window onto the highway? Or any of you old enough to remember that? Yeah, any of you remember when you were growing up wearing seat belts? Those were movements. Those were movements that changed our lives for the better, changed our health outcomes significantly, and changed the environment that we share. We are at the beginning of a movement, and it will take a movement to make the kind of change that we all know is the right thing for our children. We all know that prison populations are being predicted by third-grade reading scores. Nobody wants to say that, but we know that's true. And we know that a child's IQ can actually be changed in the 0 to 5 period. Holly talked to you about brain development. I'm not going to give it to you again, but we know that, you know, a lot of who we are and what we are comes in the package. We all know that. You know, there is a certain amount of DNA that makes up who we are, but there's a huge amount that's malleable, and it's especially malleable from day 1 to 5 years old. So the notion that we can help a child be able to read at grade level, and especially by grade 3, means that we can't start in grade 2. We can't start in grade 1. We have to start at 0. And that's a new way of thinking about how the public gets involved with children, because there is a sense that a child should be home with mom, that this is not a public enterprise until a child enters school. We have to rethink that entirely. First of all, where is mom? Mom's working every day. So children are not necessarily in their homes. They're in other places. And when they're in those other places, we need to be sure that every single one of our children is getting the kind of quality care that's going to get them to the 3rd grade reading and ready to read to learn. Philanthropy. Philanthropy is one piece of what we all talk about as the public-private partnership. It's a term that makes me cringe because it's exactly right. We all know that business, the public sector, and philanthropy have to come together to make this happen. None of us can do it by ourselves. But so often, public-private partnership from the public side means we're abdicating, the money needs to come from the private sector. Or public-private partnership from the private side means we're going to experiment and do a few things and then turn it over to you, public sector, to bring it up to scale and make it happen for everyone. Both of those are wrong. We all have to be in it from the beginning to the end. And that's what I think the Annie E. Casey Foundation is trying very hard to structure an initiative, a movement, if you will, that does that, brings us all together right from the beginning. I think the philanthropic sector is ready to participate. We've had a lot of, you know, Georgia has been a leader in many areas. Thanks to Holly and her predecessors, universal pre-K, we are a leader in that. But we all have seen the recent report from the Frank Porter Graham, and Holly, thank you for making that public, that our infants and toddlers are in terrible situations, abominable situations. We need to start right then, and we have a role. I think the philanthropic sector is recognizing it. You know, we learned recently that nationally, only 2% of philanthropic dollars that go into education go to 0 to 5. could get that to 10% in Georgia, wouldn't that make a huge difference? So I think, you know, we have a metric that we can work against, and we have some activity already. We're excited about the new Georgia Coalition for Early Education, which really is a private foundation and business coalition that will now work together with the public sector in the state of Georgia. So I think we have momentum. I think, Gail, thank you for the lead that Annie Casey is taking. That's a foundation and philanthropic effort. It's really going to bring all of us into this together, and we will have a movement. So thanks for having me.